Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Christopher sent me a note about a story he saw in the Daily Mail, and I'd seen this story, and I'd seen similar stories about it in other publications. And there's something happening right now that you should be aware of depending on your circumstances, because this woman was shocked to find her family home of 17 years sold behind her back due to a mysterious loophole, that's what they call it, that could affect vast numbers of Americans. So Tilly Armstrong wrote this, and it's about zombie mortgages. Zombie mortgages. They're coming back to life across the U.S. as home prices increase, according to experts. In the run-up to the housing crash of '08, millions of Americans took out second mortgages on their homes, which they then defaulted on during that crisis. So you go, okay, I remember that. A lot of people defaulted on loans in '08, '09. Lenders didn't pursue foreclosure because the home price crash made it unlikely they would ever get their money back. And many homeowners assumed the debt was canceled. Some homeowners were even told the debt was canceled. And I know attorneys who, for a while there, helped people get their mortgages straightened out. But the difference is, if a lawyer was involved and did their job right, they'd get this all in writing. And that's the key. So many of these dormant loans are now coming back to life, hence the term zombie mortgage. The forgotten mortgages had been bought for pennies in the dollar by debt collectors who have patiently waited for house prices to rise to record levels to make it worthwhile to chase down those debts. Now, having tacked on retroactive fees and interest, they're coming to collect the money. And this often means foreclosing on the homes to grab a huge slice of the rise in value. So a woman here from Quincy, Massachusetts, thought her second mortgage had been written off. That was until she stumbled into a foreclosure auction on her front lawn. She's a registered nurse. She'd owned the house for 17 years. She'd raised 2 children in the house, was paying off her mortgage every month. And when she had purchased the property in '05, she had taken out an 80-20 loan, which meant she had 2 mortgages, one covering 80% of the value of the home and another covering the remaining 20. But 2 years later, her first mortgage adjusted, and the monthly payments were suddenly $700 a month higher than they had been before. A year later, she got her loan modified to lower the interest rate and make it affordable again. She says that the mortgage company told her that as part of the modification, they had forgiven the second mortgage. And again, things like that did happen. I heard of crazier stuff than that. And the question is, did you get that in writing? Because them saying it is not the same as getting it in writing. So she stopped getting statements on the second mortgage and assumed that the mortgage was no more. So now in 2022, or more recently at least, a group of men gathered on her driveway for a foreclosure auction. Now, she had been receiving phone calls demanding money, but she thought that was a scam. She claims she was also told by her first mortgage company to ignore the calls because they thought it might be fraud. The men on the lawn told her, this is a foreclosure. You are going to lose this house. It turned out her second mortgage had been sold to a company within a batch of 600 others rather than being written off as she had thought. A few months after the auction, she got an orange eviction notice posted on her front door. Now, she's still living in the home. She's filed a lawsuit alleging that the company which bought her second mortgage then used unfair and deceptive practices to foreclose on the home. She says, I feel like what happened was a terrible thing, but I'm still really hopeful I'm going to stay in my home. I'm hopeful I'm going to win the case. One key detail that may be used against debt collectors is that in many cases they are adding years' worth of interest and late fees on top of the amount the homeowner initially borrowed. While companies are allowed to do this under some regulations, they're supposed to send monthly statements to homeowners detailing the added costs. So if they didn't send her a notice for 10 or 12 years, it's hard to say, well, we got late fees because you didn't pay those payments like you're supposed to. But I never got any notice to make the payments. Oh, that might be an issue. In many cases like hers, homeowners did not receive any information about the loans for years. And she's not alone. So here's the point. In New York alone, NPR found at least 10,000 old second mortgages that foreclosure activity had been initiated on in just the last 2 years. Talking New York State. The loans originated back to during the subprime lending housing bubble of '04 to '08. It had also found at least 500 old second mortgages in Maryland where steps towards foreclosure had now been taken. The numbers are very scary, says an attorney at the National Consumer Law Center. Problem is feared to be widespread across America. If you're looking at the number of these foreclosure filings, or at least the attempts to collect on the zombie debt, you're starting to see the numbers tick up dramatically into the thousands, if not more, in individual jurisdictions, says a professor at the Creighton University School of Law. That's a lot of activity. So he says that, of course, this is caused by the rise in home prices, making these mortgages worth chasing. Rising property values build equity into a property, enabling a second mortgage holder to make money even after the first mortgage holder is paid. So keep in mind that these are second mortgages. So if a second mortgage forecloses, well, when the money gets paid out from auctioning off the house, the first mortgage is first in line, and the second mortgage gets paid if there's anything left over. But if prices have gone up so dramatically as they have in the last couple of years, suddenly it's worthwhile for them to do this. But there is that problem. And the problem is that many people were told that, yeah, don't worry about that anymore. That's taken care of. It's written off. And of course, there's the joke on Seinfeld, where Kramer tells Jerry, goes, you don't have to worry about it. They just write it off. And Jerry goes, do you even know what that means? And a lot of people, and I understand that in that context, it's a joke, right? But if they write something off, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't owe the money anymore. Because a bank could, for instance, have this mortgage and they go, oh, it's worthless. They tell you, we're not going to come after you for this money. Okay. They then take the mortgage, they sell it to somebody for pennies on the dollar. They could have sold it to you for pennies on the dollar, but that's another story. But they sell it. Someone else now comes and goes, hey, we want this money. And you go, I was told by the bank that they weren't going to come after me. Yeah, we're not the bank, we're somebody else. And that's really the distinction to be made there, is for the bank to say, we're going to not come after us anymore. We're washing our hands of this, we're done. Well, unless they actually put in writing that they're extinguishing this, they can sell it to somebody else. And guess what banks do a lot of? They try to make money. If they've got something on their books that has value that they can sell, they'll sell it. And guess what they did? They realized, oh, all those mortgages that we stopped chasing 10, 15 years ago, those have value. We can bundle them and sell them to people, which is what they did. So it's going to depend on the state, and there are going to be situations where some of the homeowners can fight these under the various statutes involving debt collection and mortgages. And as they point out, if you didn't send them a notice every single month, you can't say you got late fees, for instance. That's a great example. There's other things you can do. But right now, there are people who are hearing this story going, oh, I had a second mortgage that was forgiven by the bank. Did you get that in writing? And if you didn't, you're going to have a hard time proving that somebody on the phone told you you're good to go. Who were they? Do they still work there? It's tough to prove. So it's a scary situation, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about this for a little while because home prices are high, and suddenly it might be worthwhile to chase these things down. So from the Daily Mail, Christopher sent it. Thanks a lot. Tilly Armstrong wrote it. Nurse shocked to find family home of 17 years sold behind her back due to mysterious zombie mortgage that could affect vast numbers of Americans. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I stayed in a really old hotel recently. They sent me a wake-up letter.